going to start at the back where the rear differential is, and with a 14mm wrench, I'm going to hold the nut, 14mm socket. I'm going to undo the bolts. There are 4 of them going all around. Remove all 4. Okay, there's one. Now you can take the drive shaft and spin it so you can get to the next bolt. Last one. Now this drive shaft is kind of rusty, so it's probably going to stay here, but watch out, if yours is not, it might want to fall down. I'm going to put a support here, a pole jack. If you're on the ground, you can just use a jack stand or a floor jack. And I'm going to leave a little space, that way it can fall down. I'm going to grab a hammer and hammer on these ears here, hopefully breaking it free from the yoke. There we go. All right, that's free. Let's move along. Moving along towards the front, you'll see a carrier bearing here with 2 14mm bolts. Undo those. There's one. Second one. Now this is free. And moving along even more, you'll see a second carrier bearing. Let's do the same. Remove both 14mm bolts. Now, support the drive shaft and slide it right out of the differential. There we go. Make sure you put a collection bucket underneath because some fluid will come out. At this point, if your seal was leaking before, this is the perfect time to replace it. Mine was not, so I'm just going to go ahead and install the new drive shaft. I'm going to put it on my support first. Now I'm going to take my drive shaft, line it up with the splines on the differential, and slide it right in. Perfect. On this front carrier bearing, the one that's closest to the transmission, these large washers / spacers actually go on top right here, and the bolt then goes through it. This spaces out the drive shaft off of the body the proper amount. So don't forget to put those on. And then I'm going to slide the bolts through. All right. Now I'm going to bring it up, and I'm just going to start the bolts in. I won't snug them up yet. I just want it started so that the drive shaft can be held in place. Make sure you start them by hand so they don't cross-thread. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to leave it here. Let's bolt up the rear carrier bearing. And this one also had some spacers, but these are much smaller, much thinner, so they kind of just look like washers. And do the same to those. Put it on top, and then the bolt goes through. Now I'm going to put this one up as well. If it doesn't line up, the bolt does have some adjustment to it, so just make sure you, line it up and start it in by hand. Let's do the same to this one. All right, let's get them a little closer now. I don't want to tighten them up yet, and I'll explain that in a second. This surface on the yoke, on the differential, I want to clean it up. I know the drive shaft will mount kind of where the old one was, but I don't want it to potentially sit at an angle because then you'll get vibrations as you drive down the road. So this one's not too bad. I'm just going to take a wire brush, just brush off the large debris. If you need to sand it down, scrape it, do whatever you have to do. But basically you just want to make sure that's a flat surface so the drive shaft can mount flush, and that way you don't get any sort of odd vibrations as you're driving, especially at highway speeds where this drive shaft is spinning really fast. So just scrape off all the large chunks that you see. And I'm going to apply just a little thin coating of anti-seize when I'm done cleaning it. That way it keeps things nice and not seized and rust-free, hopefully. That should do it. Now, if you go to put your drive shaft up and, uh-oh, it's too long, well, you just push it back, and that's why I didn't tighten up those bolts, because it is adjustable. Well, kind of. It's meant to slide so that you can put it up into place. There we go. Line it up with all the bolt holes, press it up against the differential, and let's put in the bolts. Remember, the bolts go in front to back. There's one. I'm not going to tighten them yet. I'm just going to start them on with the nuts. Once they're all attached, then I'll tighten them all up and torque them, as well as the carrier bearing bolts. Last one. Okay, I'm going to snug these up, and I want to snug these up before the carrier bearing bolts. That way this piece can basically press itself up against here, mount flush, and it won't put pressure on the rest of the drive shaft by pulling it this way. So I'm going to snug them up, and then I'll come back and torque them. That's one. Two. And last one. Okay, now let's do the carrier bearing bolts, and then we'll come back and torque these. Let's tighten up these carrier bearing bolts. Now let's torque them. 27 foot-pounds for all 4 carrier bearing bolts. $54 foot-pounds at the differential. Last one. All right, you're all set. To fill up your differential, you'll see the bolt to fill right here. It's got a sticker on it. Maybe yours fell off, this one didn't. Basically what you want to do is, with a 24 millimeter, just take that bolt out, put in fluid until it starts dripping out, then cap it off, and off you go.